Hello, you're very welcome to Faith Under Fire, the latest edition of the podcast from Aid to the Church in Need Ireland. My name's Michael Kelly, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Brandon Scott on this edition of the podcast. Brandon, good to be with you.
Good to be with you, Michael. Good to be back after a brief sabbatical. It's good to be back again.
It's been a busy time for ACN Ireland, but we'll get to that in a moment, I suppose. Our first attention is drawn to the fact that Aid to the Church in Need as an agency working in over 140 countries. Sometimes you try to plan, but with the best will in the world, nature intervenes and you have to alter your plans. And that very much has been the case, Brandon, when it comes to Aid to the Church in Need in terms of the devastating earthquakes in Venezuela.
Oh, certainly, yes. Completely unforeseen. So much devastation left behind. I think the earthquake was reported about 2 weeks ago now, and I think the death toll has risen to almost 4,000, with in excess of maybe 70,000 displaced. So it's a really critical time in Venezuela at this moment, because it's all about saving lives. And I think the lives that can be saved have been saved at this point. So now it's about rebuilding, and very privileged in ACN that we're at the forefront of that rebuilding process. We have our executive president of ACN International, Regina Lynch, who's a Tyrone woman like yourself, Michael, Tyrone native. She's out there as we speak in Venezuela, visiting the various sites that have been damaged in terms of church infrastructure, and she's liaising with the church to try and come up with solutions for the future. We're very fortunate as well that we have a very robust relationship with the church in Venezuela. Last year, we donated €2 million for the purposes of the endeavours of the church in Venezuela. That's ever rising because there are just so many pastoral challenges due to the political instability of the nation, due to despotic leaders. I'm not going to mince my words, they're pretty despotic and would be very hostile to the concept of Christianity. So we decided to launch an emergency appeal 2 weeks ago on foot of the devastation caused by the earthquake, and we're sending out an additional on top of the 2 million that we give on an annual basis. We're sending out an additional €100,000 for the purposes of the people of Venezuela, especially the church there, because the church is so central to the humanitarian response to the earthquake. The church really is at the epicenter of life in Venezuela. So Regina is out there now. We're following her updates. Very somber, but equally heartening as Venezuela tries to pull together and they try to recover from this awful tragedy.
And that's one of the things. I mean, you talk about the political instability there in Venezuela, and, you know, that has all been well rehearsed in the media, the financial crisis that has seen so many Venezuelans flee abroad, flee to the United States, flee to Europe. And in that context, the church becomes ever more important, doesn't it? Because as societal structures have broken down, as infrastructure has broken down, the church is still present in every community in Venezuela, present in every parish. So the church really is able, Brandon, isn't it, to funnel that aid to exactly where it's needed?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Just unfortunately, as you mentioned there, in terms of services, public services, infrastructure, just not up to standard, and haven't been up to standard. And there's been so much political instability of late, with transitional governments and transitional leaders all the time. So there's no political security there. So that's where the church is doubly important. What it does is so vital, because kind of acts as almost a political institution and delivers goods and services for people when the state isn't stepping up, and there is an abdication from the state there. So the church is very much central. As you said, it has an interconnected web, an interconnected network. So that aid does go directly to the source. That aid goes to churches. It's distributed out amongst the local communities there. It's distributed out to those who are so desperately in need of humanitarian assistance, of clothes, of food, of medicines, anything. ACN is at the forefront of the provision of that. So, you know, we touch in with, I did an interview there a few weeks ago, you know, we touch in with priests and religious on the ground. And of course, they're expected to be leaders. They're expected to be pillars of faith. But, you know, of course, during a very insecure and very precarious time, their faith is being tested too. So we also try to provide that kind of psychological support to priests and religious who are out in the front lines and trying to minister, and not just spiritually minister, as is so important, as you know, that's their main function, contribution, but also to be pillars of humanitarian assistance, to be kind of social leaders in their communities as well. So it's a very, very difficult time. But I often say there always are kind of contradictions that emerge during terrible periods like these, because you get so much tragedy, you get so much anguish, you get so much suffering, but also those who are leaders, those who are willing to fight for communities, those who are unrelenting in their pursuit of justice and of fairness and of equality, will always come to the fore at these times, and that's what's happening at this moment.
And I was one of the stories I was really struck by was a religious congregation that actually perhaps Irish people will be familiar with, Convent in Stillorgan in County Dublin, the Pious Disciples of the Divine Master. They're a congregation that's very present there in Venezuela as well. And many of them are Italian sisters. And of course, they had the opportunity very, very quickly to be evacuated by the Italian government. But the reaction was, what are you talking about? This is where we work. This is where we minister. This is where we live our lives. And that's something that really strikes me. Wherever you travel around the world for aid to the church in need, you really see priests and religious living their lives alongside people. They're not kind of people who come in every now and then, in a nice white truck, and give a bit of assistance. They actually live their lives alongside the people, and that's something that I find very moving. And that's something I think, Brandon, that we got an insight into recently as well, ourselves in ACN, how just close the church is to people in the midst of suffering, because we had a visitor in Ireland that kept us very busy. The visit was short, just a few days, but the visit was intense. Bishop William Shumali, the auxiliary bishop of the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem.
Yes, that was a very fruitful time for us to get the auxiliary bishop of the Latin Patriarch over. So yeah, we had a very extensive itinerary. We started off in Knock Shrine, and the bishop had never been to Knock Shrine, so we were discussing the history of Knock Shrine, the significance of the shrine itself, and then about the visionaries, and he celebrated mass there. But we also had our pilgrimage. That was the reason for his arrival to Ireland and to Knock. But we had our annual pilgrimage, which takes place in Knock. So we get to kind of give back to our benefactors in a way and talk about what we do on a daily basis with ACN, talk about the projects that we're involved in, and then of course the mass was the pinnacle of that, and then came the political lobbying, which was very effective as well. So we met with the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Helen McEntee. We met with John Lahart, TD, as well. And they were very keen to hear about the reflections of Bishop Shumali, obviously coming from a very sensitive environment. And, he himself has experienced a lot of strife, a lot of suffering in the Holy Land. And this is, of course, is a time of very acute suffering and a lot of uncertainty as well. So, that was equally important as well. The spiritual side is good and it's refreshing, and it did kind of nourish his faith, but also he was able to highlight the injustices being faced by Christians in the Holy Land, by both sides, by both Jewish settlers, and then of course Muslims as well, who are encroaching in some respects as well. And yeah, it was just good to get some political input from our politicians in Ireland, who I will say we accuse sometimes of not listening, but there was a lot of listening, there was a lot of respect shown, and I felt it was a very effective day. Would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, and I absolutely would agree. I think the meeting in the Oireachtas was really important, and what struck me, of course, was how Deputy Lahart, who chairs the Oireachtas Foreign Affairs Committee, how clued in he was to what was going on in the situation. Because Christians are they're fewer than 2% in the Holy Land. In the Palestinian territories, they're less than 1%. So they really are a small community. And I have to say, Brandon, what really struck me in the pilgrimage in Knock, in the meetings, in our private conversations with Bishop Shumali, was really how filled with hope he is actually in the midst of the tremendous suffering that is there. How filled with hope he is, and also the challenge. He really laid down a challenge to Irish Christians, to Irish Catholics, and this is something that we hope to fulfil in aid to the Church in need. He said your prayerful solidarity is hugely important important to us, that means a lot to us, and we really appreciate it. But he said, you know what means a lot to us as well? Is your presence. So he's really encouraging Irish Christians to come on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and that's something that we hope we will be able to fulfill in October of this year. If you'd like any more information about that, you can go onto our website, which is just www.acanIreland.org. Brandon, I wanted to ask you something in relation. You mentioned the political lobbying there. Perhaps it's a side of the work of aid to the church in need that many benefactors and many of our friends and followers will not be aware of. Would you maybe like to tell us a little bit more about the lobbying initiative of aid to the church in need, and maybe particularly the petition on religious freedom that I know you've been working very hard on?
Yeah. So lobbying is kind of an indispensable part of what we do because for a lot of politicians in Ireland, this is my own experience, my relatively short time in ACN. There's not a willful ignorance of kind of the plight of Christians around the world. A lot of people just don't know because they haven't been exposed to the coverage. So this lobbying is very important because I often say to people, it kind of transcends kind of political ideologies. It doesn't matter where you stand. It doesn't matter what you advocate for on a daily basis in the Dáil. If someone's being marginalized because of their faith, if someone's being discriminated because of their faith, if someone's being dehumanized because of their faith, you have to intervene. The natural human reaction is to intervene and to seek justice. So that's what I try to stress to people, that it's more of a human rights issue than it is a religious issue. We're not going to come in and demand that you pray the rosary with us or anything like that. But we demand that you step up and take responsibility for what's happening across the world, especially if you claim to be someone who is on the side of social justice and on the side of equality. So yes, going in and doing that advocacy and doing that lobbying with ACN is very fruitful. We meet people from all around the political spectrum who I will say are mostly receptive and aren't really aware of the nuances in these cultures, especially when it comes to Christians being attacked and Christians being harassed. So that's very valuable because ultimately when we come out of those meetings, we usually do have a valuable ally, who will then start to monitor the stories coming into them, or maybe go searching for stories involving Christians in certain regions of the world, and then they'll enhance their knowledge of the subject as well. We have a religious freedom petition. I believe it's the first of a kind for ACN. We haven't ever done this before. So the ultimate goal is to get 100,000 signatures to sign a religious freedom report, which will ultimately be presented to the major institutions and political leaders around the world. So I think one of the people who we will be presenting that report to is Antonio Guterres of the UN. So these are very key figures, key players here in public policy and in kind of international institutions. So that's our ultimate goal here, is to get 100,000 people to sign the religious freedom petition, because at ACN we always believe religious freedom is a fundamental right and not just a privilege. So this religious freedom petition is reinforcing that, and we hope to get a lot of interest, to get a lot of attention, and to hopefully have some meaningful change result from it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a wonderful initiative. And, again, anyone who's interested, they can sign that petition on our website, which is www.acnireland.org. And what you can also do on the website then is you can sign up for email updates, and you'll find out how the petition is going. But also you'll find out the wider picture around religious freedom in the world, and, the various projects that ACN is involved in throughout the world. And I should add in that context as well, we're very pleased that the European Union has recently appointed Irishwoman Mairead McGuinness as the special representative for freedom of religion and beliefs. So that's something we hope that the persecution of Christians and the mistreatment and discrimination against Christians will be very high on Mrs. McGuinness's agenda, because we live in a world where one in 10 Christians are regularly exposed to persecution for their faith. So that's no small thing. What we take for granted in Ireland is not a given throughout the world. Another thing I think that's interesting at the moment, Brandon, is the ACN International has just released our annual report, and that's showing that the work of ACN is growing, which at one level is disappointing because it means that the situation for the suffering church is as challenging as ever. But at another level, it's very, very inspiring because thanks to the generosity of so many benefactors and supporters, we're able to rise to meet that challenge. What are some of the things revealed in the annual report?
Yeah, so it goes to show that in terms of donations, and this is always very positive, it's the number of donations this year, well, in 2025, sorry, has eclipsed 2024. So that's always positive. We really appreciate the generosity of our benefactors. So we thank you for that. Yeah, it's, the world has obviously become a more unstable place over the last number of years. So as you said, the sad thing is that when wars start, we're called upon more, and we like being called upon. Of course, we do. We like being active, but it also means that we're in the center of human suffering and misery most of the time as well. So, and a lot of that involving Christians. So that's not a very positive takeaway. But yeah, it means that we're at the forefront, especially in Ukraine, of kind of just supporting communities who are feeling the devastation of war. We're always at the forefront of education, funding both training for seminarians and religious, and also lay people as well in conflict in contexts that are very adversarial. So we try to obviously empower people, because education is the means where people become empowered and can advance themselves. So we try to empower lay Christians around the world who are in very, very troubling climates to get an education, to get a decent education, and to enter the workforce as well. We want them to stay there. We don't want them to migrate to different communities in the West. We want them to stay amongst their own Christian communities where they are. And then, of course, it comes to the practicalities. So we're funding transport, funding the rebuilding of churches, or either just the building of churches as well. So it's very multifaceted. It comes to resources as well in terms of Bibles, children's Gospels. They're always very popular, and we always say, look, there might be a war on, there might be complete suffering, but we want the faith to be passed on, irrespective of whatever conflicts people are facing at this moment in time. So those resources are very valuable in terms of maintaining the faith and passing on the faith as well. So, as I often say to people, it's the perfect blend of both the spiritual and kind of the practical as well. And that's why I love ACN, because you get both of those in equal amounts, and it's a wonderful hybrid. I suppose, Michael, when you're going around to parishes like I am in Ireland, have you been struck by the generosity, especially at parish events and parish talks? I certainly can say from my own perspective, the Irish people have always been very generous to ACN, and I really hope that continues in the future. But how have you fared in parishes? Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I'm really almost embarrassed by the generosity of people. The generosity spiritually, because they really do want to pray for other Christians who are suffering throughout the world, but also, the generosity materially and financially. And very often, this is someone giving you a small amount of money because that's all they have. But yet, they're really moved by the plight of the kind of people we serve. Because we always say in ACN, that it's our privilege to serve these people, because these are God's holy faithful people in very, very difficult circumstances, and it is our privilege to serve them. And I was really struck by what you were saying there about the formation for younger people in particular. I had a real insight to that while visiting Pakistan from two points of view. I mean, one of the events that I went to was a youth event there, and Christians in Pakistan they're really treated appallingly, and this is despite the fact that they're less than 1% of the population, but they're really discriminated against in the most appalling of ways, and that's something we hope to return to in a forthcoming podcast with a guest actually from Pakistan. But yet, here are these young Pakistani Christians. They're so proud to be Pakistani. They're so patriotic, and they want to serve their country in as much as they can. And that to me is hugely inspiring. And the other thing that struck me about Pakistan, because we have this constant question in Ireland now, but what do we do with falling numbers of priests, not as many aspirants for the priesthood in the seminary as there were in the past. And yet, in somewhere like Pakistan, where we probably consider as not as advanced as ourselves, they have a vast network of catechists all over the country, working really, really hard. And in fact, the parish community that might only see a priest once a month, they really are the center of that community, the catechists. And I think that's something that we can learn a lot from in Ireland as well.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, no, you're so right. And I think I often say to people that kind of culture is coming in because of the influx of maybe foreign born priests, and people are getting a better insight in parishes of the persecution Christians face, because the lived experience of someone, maybe a priest from northern Nigeria who's moved to Ireland, or a priest from China, where it's much more pervasive and subtle. They might be talking amongst their parishioners, or they might use homilies to express what they felt and how they fared in these countries. So I think that there is a growing recognition, which is always positive, but we're still really at the outset of our journey there in terms of kind of awareness from an Irish context. But of course, we always appreciate the generosity, and it's our job to go to parishes and try to enlighten people in with my dulcet Navan tones and your dulcet Tyrone tones. So there you go. But
God
yeah,
love
so
them.
God love them if they can understand us. That is, yeah. But so yeah, we just decided to come back. After a few weeks, I think it was a few months actually, because it's just been a very busy time, and give a recap of what we've been doing over the last few months and kind of what we've been focusing on, and then also what we hope to focus on in the immediate future. And of course, encompassing that would be the Religious Freedom Report. And as Michael said, please do sign that if you can. It would be absolutely fantastic. We want to get as many signatures as we possibly can, get it out there and present it to these institutions come the end of the year. That would be absolutely fantastic. So thanks for listening in. From me, Brandon Scott, and my colleague Michael, we hope you enjoy our podcast, and we hope to start back very soon with a whole array of guests from various parts of the world who will shed light into what they're facing as Christians, and how faith is really at the centre of their survival in many respects. So we hope you'll be encouraged by those stories, which are very positive, equally sad, equally positive, but we always want to shine a light on the positive side as well. So we hope to see you again, and please like and subscribe.